Hello everybody, good evening. My name is Satyajit and I welcome you all on this daily answer writing program where we discuss one question for UPSC on a daily basis at 9 p.m. sharp. As I am faculty for Indian Society, GS and Sociology, I would like to discuss one question from Indian Society syllabus and one of the interesting questions that UPSC had asked in the recent years. That question is from the topic called as population and population associated issues, where the topic they have chosen as an issue is the lowering of the sex ratios. But very interestingly, they had asked this question about SCs and STs. We will first read out this question. How do you explain the statistics that show the sex ratio in tribes in India is more favorable to women than the sex ratio among the scheduled castes? Okay, so it's in simple words. If I would like to discuss this question, the meaning of this question, what is the exact demand? They want you to ask how the scheduled caste have lower sex ratios than the scheduled tribes, and how we can observe the constant and sustained sex ratio, higher sex ratio in scheduled tribes than scheduled castes. Okay, and both of these communities are vulnerable sections in societies, and these sections are given more importance and attention in policy making. But despite all these attentions and interventions by the government, scheduled castes and their sex ratio remains one of the staggering issue, and that government or the UPSC through this question wants to you can say bring your focus to this issue. Now let's discuss what is exact demand, locus and focus of this question. By the way, this is one of the simple question. You have to just argue in the favor how the tribes have maintained their higher sex ratio, and why not the scheduled caste have not maintained their sex ratio. But as a 12.5 marker, we will consider this question for 10 marks. And as we have again less number of points, anybody who is going directly to the examination will have the let's say 4 to 5 more important points there, not like 10 points, different points. But this question is for 10 marks. Let's consider that. And if you draw the skeleton of this question, how we can divide the 2 pages for this question is very another simplistic alignment of your content. Firstly, you can start with the as formality introduction. In introduction, you can mention few facts and data, because there is a lot of scope to introduce with this question with the help of few data, like data on the sex ratio. Okay, but you have to mention the sex ratio of both these communities. What is the sex ratio of scheduled tribe and what is the sex ratio of scheduled caste? At the same time, if you are not able to recall the exact sex ratio of these communities like scheduled tribes and scheduled castes, which is again a high possibility that you won't be able to recall the sex ratio at the time of examination, then in that case you can let's say try another type of introduction that I have tried here. Okay, but more precisely, you can go like directly data with the sex ratio. Then after that, you can give headline here. Okay, the headline, the reasons behind the low sex ratio among scheduled caste than scheduled tribes, or what they have asked, the reasons behind higher sex ratio in tribes than scheduled caste. Okay, just mention here the reasons behind higher sex ratio in tribes than scheduled caste. Okay, and then start your content arguing, justifying that why these scheduled tribes have higher content, I mean higher sex ratio than scheduled caste. And lastly, you can conclude here. Okay, and conclusion should be how we can balance, how we can improve the sex ratio among the scheduled castes, because the sex ratio among scheduled castes is lowering and is low. So you can provide solutions. Okay, solutions to improve the sex ratio among scheduled castes. Okay, sex ratio among scheduled castes. So introduction can be fact or any other diplomatic introduction. If you don't know the facts and data and figures, then after that you just argue why the question or the fact is that your sex ratio among tribes is higher, and lastly provide solutions for increasing sex ratio in scheduled caste. Let's discuss the content. By the way, the content can be like introduction. Look at that. In this introduction, I have not introduced with the help of data and facts, because at the time of examination, I'm considering I won't be able to recall the exact data and figures from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Okay, we will most probably will know only the national average sex ratio, but not a particular community sex ratio. So in that case, how you can manage your content, how diplomatically you can play with them. So the variation in the sex ratios among different social groups in India, such as tribes and scheduled caste, can be attributed to complex interplay of historical, cultural, socio-economic factors. So I have just introduced with them how the sex ratio can be influenced because of these factors like history, because of the culture, socio-economic factors, and the several factors may help to explain why the sex ratio is lower. So it's very simple diplomatic answer or introduction where we are not showcasing, we are not able to recall the facts and data, and that's how we manage this fact. Okay, and what the body part starts with this first point. This is body part, by the way. The body part, I would like to start with one important the point or observation because of which the tribes have maintained their higher sex ratio. The cultural practice. In tribes, they have culture of majorly in many tribes they have matriarchal cultures. Okay, and if not matriarchal, at least, but they respect their women. They respect their dignity. They respect the equal rights of women. They give more importance to women in domestic as well as workforce course. Okay, at the same time, they are given more importance in religious practices, and that's how the extreme forms of patriarchy are not present in tribes, just like we have in our normal population and also among scheduled castes. So, in contrast to scheduled caste, the position, social position of a woman in tribes is much better than scheduled caste. At the same time, economic position of women of scheduled tribes is much better than scheduled caste, and that's how women are represented in let's say domestic labor also and the workforce also. So they have much more socio-economic empowerment parameters better than the scheduled caste. So I can say the tribes have culture of respecting women and giving them gender dignity. So the cultural practice is important among tribes because of which they have maintained the sex ratio higher. And as you know, because of these cultural practices of patriarchy and extreme patriarchy in society, in normal society, like we have in let's say other populations like SCs and other caste members, the practices like female feticide and infanticide are very rampant, and the practices like female feticide, infanticide, because of son meta preference and patriarchy, are completely or most probably absent in tribes, and that's how the form of patriarchy they experience in their societies is very mild form. And many tribes like Garo, Khasi, even Nayars, they have matriarchal social structures in which the women are at the authority position. So cultural practices are very important in tribes, which helps to maintain the higher sex ratio among the tribes. Then geographical isolation is again one of the important factor because of which tribes are now been able to or have been able to maintain their higher sex ratios, as these practices of social meta preference, female feticide, infanticide, culture of patriarchy, and the tribes are much away from these cultural practices in wider societies like patriarchal societies. And because of this geographical isolation, let's say tribes in Northeast India, tribes in Andaman Nicobar, tribes in Central Indian forests. So because of this geographical isolation, these widespread cultural practices are not been able to reach to these remotely placed locations of the tribes. And because of this geographical isolation and their self-sufficiency, the tribes have maintained their unique culture of respecting women there, and they have not been able to these other practices like mainstream India. The mainstream Indian practices are not been able to influence the tribal cultures yet. Okay, so geographical isolation is another important factor because of which tribes have maintained their sex ratio higher. Economic activities, and if you consider these tribal societies, they are mostly primitive form of societies. They practice agriculture, they practice hunting, gathering, they practice, let's say, minor forest produce, they gather and they sell and something like this. So these economic activities are of very, let's say, pre-industrial society level. And in this in these economic activities, women also participate equally. Okay, and that's so if you observe women of tribal communities, they are economically and socially empowered. And as women are participating in labor force, women are contributing in tribal economies. Therefore, the women are given with important, let's say, decision making powers and etc. And that's how women are, and the birth of women is respected in scheduled tribes. In contrast to that, if you observe in other societies like scheduled castes, especially, or the few societies from Northwest India and Punjab and Haryana, after Green Revolution, especially, the women were taken out of the farm sector because suddenly the income started rising among the farmers. And as the income started rising because of Green Revolution, the women were domesticated because there was no need to work in the fields by the women. Okay, now the male member were generating more income, and that's how women were domesticated because of higher income in the Green Revolution. But that phenomena we won't observe in tribes. The tribal women, they still continue to contribute economically in tribal economies, and that's how they have economic independence, autonomy, and social dignity also. So economic activities in tribal societies and their respective contribution by the women in these societies. Lastly, social programs. In many areas, the government, of course, in throughout India, the government is implementing many important initiatives like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and many other like family planning and etc. Yeah, to improve the situation of the sex ratio throughout India. But the government intervention and the policy intervention can vary from one region to another. The tribal affairs ministry is taking care of its population very, let's say, meticulously. And the efforts of this tribal ministry and other instruments and the taking care of these tribals in respect of health and education is improving and has maintained the situation of better sex ratio among the tribes. In contrast to that, if you observe the practices like untouchability, the practices of caste system, the practices of let's say not temple entry and etc., they are still rampant in our societies, and that's how the scheduled caste, they still face the wraths of untouchability and the practices like the new forms of untouchability. And because of these social programs and their intervention, scheduled tribes have maintained their higher sex ratio. One important factor here, the historical factors, where we can observe that historically the tribes were matriarchal. The tribes respected equal gender and their respect, and that's so scheduled caste SCs, they belong to, historically they belong to Dalits or the untouchables, and because of they were Dalits and untouchables, the other complete social structures and society had humiliated them in the history of the. And if you observe the last 2000 or at least 2000 years history, SC caste has been humiliated and treated as untouchables, and because of these social practices, the sex ratio among the tribes, the sex ratio among the scheduled caste is lower than the tribes. The tribes have not faced such, you can say, discrimination in society in, let's say, at least in the last 1000 years. So SCs, they have been humiliated in the history, and the tribes relatively not humiliated as compared to scheduled caste. That can be another reason where the women are given respect in the societies. So historical factor can be the last factor. So that's how our 5 points are more important here in the body part. Lastly, how we can conclude. The conclusion can be how we can solve or how we can improve the situation of lowering sex ratio among the scheduled caste. So you can provide solutions like you can say awareness generation, family planning techniques, and many other things. How we can improve the scheduled caste population, especially the population of girl child. Okay, and how we can tackle the issue of patriarchy and son meta preference among scheduled caste, and that's how we can bring about parity in the sex ratio of these two communities, and we can imagine India of more women and more girls than men in near future. So on this note, I would like to thank you very much for this question. This question was from Indian society, and chapter was population. Likely, in the next session, in the next question, I would like to discuss again one another question about Indian society. Till then, I would like to thank you very much and have a good night.